What's up, guys? Today, my guest on the podcast is Conor White-Sullivan, CEO and co-founder of Rome Research, which is one of the hottest startups out there right now. They raised this seed round at, I think, a $200 million valuation. Conor is one of the most fascinating, crazy people that I know and that I've gotten the pleasure to put on the podcast. As always, if you like the episode, smash subscribe, hit the like button, turn on post notifications. We're bringing lots of fresh content on the Quest channel. So here's Conor. Please enjoy. All right, Conor. Thanks for coming on the show. How are you?
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, I'm doing well. Good to be here.
All right, let's just dive right in.
Your talk with Balaji was one of my favorite, so there's a lot to live up to.
Interviewing Balaji is the best because you can just give him any topics, like any seed topics, and he will take you down an entire frameworked intellectual rabbit hole about which basically all roads point to decentralization in some form or another, but he'll take you on a very interesting journey to get there. And he's incredible. One of the smartest people I know.
I will not live up to that standard, but I'll do what I can to keep it interesting. So, yeah.
Okay. While I was doing research, one thing what I want to start with is I was doing some research and I heard that you spent 9 months studying evangelical Christian communities and participating in those communities. Is that true?
I would say it was a lot longer than 9 months. I around the time that I got introduced to the notion of startups, I was a member of an evangelical church plant, which is, if you could think of it as sort of religious startups. Churches, they had noticed that churches grow the fastest when they are between 8 and 50 people. And so there was a whole movement of churches planting churches to try and build community in places where, that were at the time, the county that I was in was the least evangelical county in America, or one of the least, it was an incredibly secular, region of Massachusetts. And I went in there with a bit of a personal seeking attitude and a bit of a applied anthropology attitude. Previously, I had been spending a few months attending an almost all Black church, the exception being me. And that was sort of where I first started getting extremely interested in a type of Christianity that was very different from what I'd grown up with, and seeing that, there was something really real and really powerful and really, something that met needs that I did not see the internet being capable of meeting. So I was really fascinated with the whole notion of, social technology as something that could scale and something that could change just as quickly as mechanical or other kinds of technology. So Christianity has been a long-term fascination of mine for a very long time. Christianity, Islam, like any, just the notion of observing religions like you would observe an animal, or like you would observe a piece of technology. There's aspects of both.
You were doing this as an anthropology student, or as a student of anthropology, that was what was interesting about it to you?
So there's just a notion in anthropology of participant observation that, especially in a complex social situation, especially when we're you are involved in relationships, you are playing a role in some sort of social structure that's there, and your beliefs do shape the reality in your subjective experience, right? We are mostly predicting the future that we are currently experiencing on a moment-to-moment basis. So there was this long-standing notion in anthropology of ethnography and participant observation, that if you really want to understand something, you have to immerse yourself in it. And so I had a little bit of a detached attitude of I'm going in and studying. I'd grown up I would say ethnically Catholic. My mother was an Irish immigrant, and like for us, Catholicism was like part of our ethnic identity more so than like we just, when you lost your keys, you prayed to the saints, right? And if you really lost your keys, you prayed to St. Jude for hopeless cases, right? But the major, like I hadn't experienced anything like the kind of relationship that many Christians in America like have with Jesus, like that, or even with God. Like as a Catholic, my main relationship was with saints who you asked for stuff or to help you with problems. And I was really fascinated by just the religious impulse, the like kind of structure that gives to people, the kind of bonds that it allows people to have with one another, like the sort of the really, 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 really good things that religion has, and the fact that many of the things that people claim are bad, they end up flocking to in every other form, right? Politics is, I don't think we've become any less religious as a country. I think we've just changed the things that
shifted to
we
different
like
organizational structures.
Yeah. And sometimes just as hierarchical, just as dogmatic, just as but we like, it's interesting to think about how like in the Middle Ages, like no one really thought about like being Catholic, right? Like everyone believed in God. It was just completely taken for granted. It was the same as like people thinking it's a good idea to go to college now, right? Like it was just like the idea, like there might be a handful of heretics, but it wasn't like, you were choosing to be religious or choosing one religion from many. It was like either God or more like something else. So yeah, I think there's a lot of times the thing which is the real religion is the thing that is not even like, that is unnamed and unquestioned. So
that's interest is fascinating to me, because I went through my own like period a couple of years ago. I was super fascinated by evangelical churches, and it started with reading. Did you ever read Purpose Driven Church by Rick Warren? Where he describes like the process of building Saddleback Church in Orange County. And I thought that was like a fascinating overview of how to build a purpose-driven organization, which applies to like many things beyond just churches. And so I was kind of thinking of it through the lens of how to build a online organization. Like, what are the things that the principles here that apply to, like, he goes through like the different concentric circles of people who are members of the church, or they have different terminology that I'm going to forget, but like the different people who are participants in a church organization, and how they're motivated, and how they like create structure for them and a mission for them. And I remember giving this book to my co-founder of Twitch, actually, Emmett, who's still the CEO of Twitch, and saying like, this guy has figured it out. Like, you should study this book when thinking about how to create community on Twitch.
And what did he say?
He thought it was very analogous. He thought it was there were like very parallel structures with, kind of the different layers of participation. Like it fundamentally in the book, Rick Warren describes kind of like these different layers of participation, from, the people who are like very casual attendees, to people who are members of the church, to people who are like the what's the terminology? The people who are volunteers, basically, and then the staff. And it's very similar to Twitch, where you have drive-by viewers who are just like coming by because they clicked on a link, and you have people who are like volunteers in some way, like moderators or like participants or in chat. Then you have people who are like the streamers, the content creators, who are like, their lives are even more Twitch centric. And so how do you create structures around all of how those people interact, and how to get them to like the next level? That's kind of what was described in the book, that I thought was really fascinating.
Yeah, I feel like there's it's cool that your co-founder like was open to seeing the parallels. I guess I'd be surprised actually if they were not that open-minded. But I find that like a lot of folks, particularly in the Bay Area, were like really averse to like, so I grew up in Salem, Massachusetts, and so like our wrestling team was the witches. You know, there were like the cops have like a flying witch logo. You know, like everyone is flocks to the city every summer and fall to like see where they hung the witches, right? And you know, like there's I expect that there's like something of like you know, growing up around that, you sort of become pretty skeptical of any kind of hegemonic culture that's like, you know, demonizes a particular way of thinking or being, right? I think that was part of the fascination for me with Christianity, was that like, I mean, even you know, even to my parents, like there was I was interested in it partially because I'd gotten into Stoicism, and there was this idea that like find the people who are honestly, you know, worshiping God and like, you know, be in communion with them. And you know, I sort of felt like just like being spiritual but not religious and doing my own thing was like there was something that I was missing from the real experience. But there was definitely a part of me that was just like really interested in seeking out the like forbidden, and you know, like the like sort of conservative evangelical Christianity in New England is like extremely forbidden. Like nothing could seem
Yeah.
closer to like the devil's work than like, you know, than, you know, spending time with conservative Christians. And I mean, I had gotten particularly like moved really emotionally. The first time that I like really felt race was like when I was in Virginia doing a bunch of work, you know, affiliated or indirectly working with the Obama campaign in 2008. And you know, I went to a super conservative like church for African American, Caribbean like immigrants, and it was like it was just one of the most intense emotional experiences that I've been in. But I felt so welcomed and so like brought into that community in like in just a way that I had not experienced in any kind of secular culture. And that was one of the things that got me like it was a thing I consistently saw you know, while I was actively engaged in sort of the evangelical world, of like the community's intense and it's real and people actually care about your soul and they care about your well-being, and like, you know, they like see you as a full human that has your own like baggage. And there's a very interesting way in which like all of that is designed to reinforce a narrative of like actually you're okay, actually God loves you, like, and you know, you don't need to be a particular way, like God loves you where you're at right now, but like now that you can feel that love and we can embody that for you, you can change things in your life that you couldn't have imagined changing. And that for me felt like it's a much more inspiring vision than like, you know, building a company or like making a ton of money. It's like having like change from the inside out and then having that cascade into the environment around you. But having it start with like, you know, having it all be built on one, you know, consistent and self-reinforcing narrative of like love and acceptance and forgiveness, and like also being called to improve. It was pretty wild to see. So yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
but I don't know where you wanted to take the notion of like, you know, like that's my you know, yeah, that's I'm curious what you're interested in, you know, drilling into with that, or if there's other things you were curious about too.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I was just wanted to drill into it because I was curious what you took away from that. You know, you're not like involved in the community anymore, right? Like, so like what I'm just fascinated because I went through my own period of fascination, like I said, and then, you know, I was watching like Rick Warren videos and Joel Osteen videos and like trying to understand what do people get through from this, and realizing like, you know, because I'm probably from a similar background. Like I grew up in Seattle in the middle of the city. Like it was evangelical Christianity. It was like something that was very foreign to like the, you know, progressive city. And like, I'd never thought about it, never heard about it. And I only heard about it in the context of like, this is kind of antithetical to these values that like all the people around you care about. Right. And so
Yeah. Oh,
then
they're
when I started
supposedly
to,
like ignorant and evil and prejudice and all these other things, right? Like, you know, everything
yeah,
that a good person is not is, that's what you should expect from the religious right. So yeah.
Exactly. And then when I went through and like started watching the content, I'm like, oh, this is very inspiring. Like you said, it's like inspiring. And I can see how this creates structure for people in their lives to make
Yep.
change in a very positive way,
Yep.
in the message. And so,
Yep.
that's all. My interest is just talking about that. And like, I'm curious, like what did you take away from that?
I mean,
That
there was,
period.
yeah, I remember like, uh, I, eh, someone once told me like, someone once told me like, you're not really, well, I'll tell the quick story, right? So in 2008, I was really interested in this guy, Miles Horton, who was like a hillbilly who had helped train like Rosa Parks and Dr. King in community organizing. He ran this like peer-to-peer, um, you know, organizing center and like grassroots school called the Highlander Folk School. And I was interested. I had a motorcycle. I was interested in sort of doing a like almost pilgrimage to go check this place out, because I like his attitude of like people debating one another, learning from one another, like bottoms up education, and also just this whole like sort of almost like libertarian socialist attitude I found like particularly inspiring. And while I was and I had just discovered this site Couchsurfing, which I don't know if you've heard of. It was like a
Yeah, I
precursor to
remember.
Airbnb, but it was all free, right? And I was really like inspired by this whole notion of like create the creation of new commons, the creation of people who are interested in supporting one another in like new kinds of social structures, and have like using reputation rather than capital for like putting people up. And so I was riding through the South to go visit this place and couch surf, and at one point I crashed my motorcycle and I ended up like stuck in this town waiting for a part. Well, like, but right after crashing, I was able to like get the bike to a mechanic, and I phoned like the house I was supposed to stay at was like a few towns over. So I called a number on a flyer for the Evangelical Motorcycle Association. There was a phone number listed, and I called this guy, and I was like quoting something out of the Bible to him, and I was all like hey, like I'm riding through. I'm like, do you have any idea where I can sleep tonight? And I'm like, it turns out this guy's the former head of police for the town. And I was like really into psychedelics at the time. Like I'm like a homeless looking kid who's coming down from like basically like outside DC, like Northern Virginia. And I stayed with him for a night, and we were having a whole debate on like different interpretations of scripture. And he was basically like, you're not doing Christianity unless you're in a church. That's actually what matters. Right. And I thought I was all clever, and I had all sorts of ways of like playing Bible Sudoku of like how to like use different verses to like support whatever position I actually wanted to have for myself. Right. Like whatever would allow me to like change the least and like put myself
Yeah.
high and put him like down lower. Right. I was like being extremely, a sophist. Right. And he was like, kid, like Christianity is going to church with other people who hold you accountable through fellowship. And I do feel like that's the big difference between religion and spirituality. Is like religion is what we believe together and how we act together based on those things. And it is like the religion that we're living through right now, like the dominant religion in the West, the sort of liberal humanism, right, says that any constraints that you put on the individual, anything that like there should be no obligations anyone should ever have to anyone else that they don't opt into, right? Like no commitment to your like oh, you've had kids with somebody, like it's really what makes the parents happy that matters, right? Oh, like like your partner got in a car crash and now you're not attracted to them anymore, like it doesn't matter, like you can just switch to somebody else, right? Like we put, like, in the name of freedom for the individual, we also then put a huge amount of burden on people to constantly be making choices, and saying that, like, actually, like the only thing that matters is that you have maximum choice over everything. But when you have, you know, like, there is advantage to being able to scaffold your attention and put all of your attention on like just the right thing. There's a reason like Obama wore the same 2 suits, and like Zuck and Steve Jobs like wore the same shirt over and over again, right? Like sometimes just being able to focus on only making a handful of decisions, and, you know, having like not every variable be free floating, especially for coordinating with other people, it's important. So I feel like, yeah, there's that's the thing that I get interested in with religion, is like it will, you know, obviously not always be perfect, but like there is something to constraints, I guess, and like the ability to choose to exist in a situation that has those constraints. But I'm totally a hypocrite because like I haven't been able to find a church that I can, you know, wake up to attend on Sunday mornings, right? Like
Yeah.
so, you know, but yeah, I do, uh, it's funny, for years, I actually, I do think that one of the biggest challenges we're going through sort of like, as is, you know, at least Western civilization, but like really like the globe right now, is that, or one of the challenges that seems like particularly relevant to Christianity is like we haven't figured out how to square evolution with like and like an environment that's rapidly changing, with any of the sort of more like long-standing battle-tested wisdom traditions, or like, you know, like evolution is the thing that Christianity couldn't really contain, like when it was interpreted in this particular way. I feel like that's one of the more interesting problems right now. So like I wanted to be a Christian really bad. I really thought it would, like I could tell that, yeah, like I could tell there was something there, and I really did like desire to be able to sort of like fully, you know, fully believe like a conservative kind of Christianity, almost like a gospel centric one, not necessarily a politically conservative one, but like a like but yeah, like I think the thing that is challenging is like, how do you, you know, and this was a project that I spent, you know, quite a few years working on, before Rome, was like, what would it look like to have a religion based on truth, right? Like what kind of
Yeah.
social structure could we do if we were trying to figure out how to actually perceive the world together, and how to like not have everything just be filtered through like my biases or my, like, you know, what I would like to be true, or like what will allow me social status or power, or like what narrative I can use to like to put as few requirements on myself as possible. And
Well,
yeah, how could we, like what would we like to actually have the kind of commitment to other people, and the kind of like and the kind of love that you see in Christianity, but like from a context of, we're trying to discover truth together. And so yeah, and that is, that's even, it's like I'm like, it's easier to wake up on time for Sunday, and I can't even do that. So, you know, but
that's
yeah,
that's super interesting, because I think that there is this, you know, we've gone through, there was this, you know, decades long period of like, or liberal humanism was kind of the dominant idea, right? This freedom of everything was kind of this
yeah,
dominant idea in the West. And in some ways that's really empowering because it gave people freedom. And in other ways, it created a lot of dissatisfaction because people have all this choice. And um,
and
I think
one of the
it
things I
creates a lot
love,
of
so like
socially hard
the guy
things.
who I
Yeah.
think has talked about this for sure, like I think the person who's talked about this most articulately is Matthew Crawford. He's got a book, like The World Beyond Your Head, becoming an individual in the age of distraction. And one of the things he talks about is, what he terms like the neoliberal consensus, like liberal critics. So like any social norm, right? Like, especially when you just think of like the massive diversity of human experience, right? If you have any sort of social heuristic, which says like, in general, like this is going to be like, this structure is going to work best for like how to have a family, right? There's always going to be exceptions, right? There's always, maybe in general, from almost all people, like getting married, raising kids, and your kids having an environment where you're not going to abandon them ever, and like you're just going to figure out how to work it out with like your romantic partner, and like there isn't even an expectation that you guys are going to like each other all the time, but like there's a mutual respect and a long-standing commitment that's going to work for like 95% of the population, right? Or maybe 90%. And the ones who it doesn't work for, like there are other escape hatches. They're like, if things get really bad, there's checks and balances because there's an entire commitment from the whole community to make all these things work, right? Not going to be perfect, but there's two things that that happen after the Enlightenment, because the Enlightenment says like the only truth is like subjective experience, right? Like I think therefore I am. Like there can be in overthrowing the authority of like priests and kings, right? They put all of the there can be no consensus reality. There's just the reality of like you should live out your best life. And that's all that you can really do is live out your best life. There's no notion of like a good life or any kind of normative experience that could possibly work for, a large portion of a population, right? But like Crawford points out this idea of like the neoliberal consensus of like you have, the left criticizing every institution because you can find a flaw in every institution and say like, but hey, here's an exception where like it doesn't work, therefore that's fundamentally unjust to the individual, therefore we should like cut it away completely, right? And we should have no fault divorce is one I'm going to keep harkening back to, because I think that like the idea that someone could just like I'm very grateful my parents stuck together, but like there's so many people who didn't have that experience, and I do feel like this there's so much carnage in our society because people feel like they could be so easily abandoned, and there's so like such a like so much of people being like, oh, everyone's like clamoring for attention, or like people like are afraid of being abandoned because half of these marriages are ending in divorce, which means their parents who are abandoning their 6-year-old or their 8-year-old and just leaving in the middle of the night and saying, hey, sorry, I'm done, I'm going to live down the street now, right? That's not something that like is like historic. There's a historic precedent for, right?
Right.
And so you have like capital can fill in and set up through like nudges and sort of choice architectures of like behavioral economics and advertising, like, oh, like well, what's wrong with spending your life playing nothing but video games all day, right? Like, or like, we're going to scaffold your attention for whatever will cause us to like be able to extract profit. And so, like there's no religion that can scaffold your attention towards like prayers of like love or forgiveness or anything like that, right? But there's like whatever is getting the most tweets that's going to keep you on the site the longest, right? Like our attention is all scaffolded by capital now instead, because all of the existing structures have been dismantled. So anyways, that is my politics rant, but I feel like Matthew
No, I love
like,
that. I
said something that I thought was really interesting.
I agree with that. And I think that there's, people are looking for, the pendulum is kind of swinging back in a way, and people are looking for like structures to fill that void, right? And it could be, like CRT and wokeism right now, or it could be, something else. But people are looking for structures where they can like, there's an orthodoxy and they can like make less decisions, I think have more structure in their lives. And I wonder, like you talked a little bit about your first startup being
like getting things done. Right?
Yeah.
Like there's all sorts of, there's many kinds of, it's not just narratives for how to interpret your life. There's like, getting things done is like a monastic schedule, and all of these things are scaffolds of attention that say, I want less choice. Like I want to be able to set up, like make it like Odysseus tying himself to the mast so he can hear the siren song and like still, have a long-term outcome that he's hopeful for, right? Like, attention scaffolds are extremely powerful. And religions are one of them. Like, narrative structures are another one, like, but also just like habits and like, regimented schedules are another one. There's a lot of different kinds of what I would say are like algorithms of thought or cultural jigs, like ways of like finding regularity in a complex area so that you can pursue things that are more challenging, more difficult. And this is a thing that I could go on about Douglas Engelbart and sort of augmenting the human intellect into like how to boost our collective intelligence and that kind of stuff. But like one of the main things he talks about is it's not just tools that make you smarter. It's like the methods you have and the language you have. Both of those are like ways of augmenting individual and collective intelligence. And so, when you think about technology that improves our ability to solve real problems, it's not just about like an app. It's also about like what kind of question, like is there a way that you try to prove yourself wrong, or so, like mental patterns that you have that you can reach to like over and over again that will like consistently guide your attention in one direction or another, right? Do you always try to find fault or like who's to blame, or do you like try and say like, oh, like what way might this person who disagreed with me, what way might they be true, right? How is like all of these are attention schemas, right? So
and how do we I mean, this is a perfect segue into what you're doing now, with Rome, but like how that part that you said last is very interesting to me. It's like, how do you reinforce those kinds of mental schemas for people? Like the idea that you could listen to somebody who is saying something that you don't agree with up front, or like that has introducing a new idea that may be counter to an idea that you have. I feel like we are, we're actually in a negative spiral where we're reinforcing our ability not to do that, right? With like, by filter bubbles, like only reading things that we agree with on Twitter and Facebook or whatever. It's getting to the point where like when someone introduces an idea you don't agree with, you're like immediately just like shut that person off, right? And that's like pretty bad. We've seen this massive bifurcation in society.
I'm not actually sure the filter bubble. I'm not actually sure that the filter bubble is totally true, because I'd have to dig into my graph a little bit. I remember seeing something recently that stood out of like, something like there's a meme on Twitter of, it's bad on purpose to make you click, right? Like the things that go most viral are the things which spark outrage, not necessarily the things which like have confirmation bias. So, there is this notion that like the stuff which is and yeah, this.
Well, I think that's an example of.
Because I like.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say like cuddling and being angry at the outgroup are the two things which release oxytocin in humans, right? Like being angry at the other, together does the same sort of thing as like, forming close, intimate bonds with people. So there's a lot of, it takes practice, and it takes a certain amount of like principled desire to like try and do real truth seeking, right? I like to think like not, who am I if I believe this, but like, is it true? Or like, in what way does this like, what might cause me to hold my beliefs besides them being true, right? How does this like reinforce a narrative of myself or whatever, right? Like that's extra work. But if you're, I think there's a lot of ways you can set up your attention to check for these kinds of things. But the question is like why do you want to? And I think the key is like right now I'm just hoping to try and figure out like, could you have a what would in the small, in a way that doesn't scale a like really or doesn't like need to scale like globally, what does like a really strong truth seeking culture look like, like that allows people to sort of be fully who they are, like be unafraid to be wrong, like that kind of and like really try to figure out how to make sense of complex stuff together. And how, like in what ways is that culture different from like the culture that we're living in right now. So at least people could choose, like right now there's like, it's sort of like, this is water. Like, it's like, we don't even see that there's another kind of culture we could live in. So I'm like, just give me the existence proof that you can have a really good sense-making society that is like, not just jockeying for social status or like, trying to feel really good about like, like their own story of self, but like is supporting one another to try and make sense of a complex world. Yeah.
How do you think that
Go on.
gets incubated? That truth-seeking culture gets incubated? Like, how would you go about, like, you said you're interested in like discovering what that is. Like, how does that get, how does that manifest? And like,
I mean, it's one of the reasons I'm trying to, anything worth doing is worth doing wrong. So you kind of have to just like start. And then like, I think you, I mean, my first company was trying to build a online, the thesis was that there's all this stuff you could do with hypermedia, with web platforms for like structuring knowledge so that you could actually have thousands of people talking to one another and have sort of a wisdom of the crowd thing that actually works. Like have people, debating points and, doing something that was not just a discussion board where you had to read every comment, but something where like you could figure out how to bubble up the best ideas. But we tried to do it in the political arena. And in the political arena, you had a lot of people who were actively interested in making sure that, they didn't really care about whether the other person was right. They just, they cared about winning more than they cared about like finding the like really good nuance point from whoever they were disagreeing with. And so, the thing that I've been working on with Rome since 2013, right? That was what I worked on from 2009 until like 2011, and then I ran
that was localocracy.
Still thinking about collective intelligence. Yeah, that was localocracy. And I was like, okay, let me simplify the problem to just try to build a tool that I can use to bring a bunch of authors I'm reading into conversation. Like, let me try and just like do like debate between even like my like many selves, right? Like if you've experienced internal conflict around a complex decision, you could model it as, well, a part of me feels like I should do this and a part of me feels like I should do that. And, it's hard to make progress when you're kind of at war with yourself. And so my thought was, well, that's a place where you're going to have a lot of fast iteration cycles and you're going to be able to explore a bunch of things. So I'll build a single player tool to try to figure out how to use that as a stepping stone for like the multiplayer dynamics of how a group of people could like make sense together. And so that's where Rome as it is right now came from. And then basically for the last year, I've been trying to figure out, okay, how do we, how do you build a really powerful learning organization, right? One where like, we are building a map of the problem space. We're building a map of the skills that are like necessary to solve the problems. And we are figuring out how to scaffold the attention of other people on the team so that we can like asynchronously think about really hard stuff, but also create an artifact so that if somebody comes in 3 years from now and they know something we don't, right? They don't have to have been in all the meetings. We don't have to reform all those meetings.
Redo the whole
start to have
process.
Some of the context. Yeah, right. And so like the question is like, can you develop sort of like, and this is one approach. Now that doesn't work if you don't have a super high trust environment where people feel like they can actually say what they think, like they feel like, like we judge ideas hardly, but not people. And like that there is a sense of trust that if you're trying really hard to understand and you're okay with some like levels of uncertainty and just like the human nature of like this environment we're in, like we're going to judge ideas harshly, we're going to judge work harshly, but like you're good, you're fundamentally fine, right? So that's kind of that's the thing I'm trying to figure out right now. Basically, after we we were for many years it was hard for me to articulate what Rome was, right? So it was very hard. We were not really funded by investors. You know, we were able to convince a handful of researchers to help us sort of like limp along. And Rome was extremely illegible to the outside world until we kind of took off. And then as soon as we got to a stage where, you know,
how do you explain it now?
Took us about 6
Like
weeks to get to.
how do you
How
explain
would I
it now?
explain
Yeah.
Rome right now? Like where
Yeah.
we're, it's Excel for thoughts. It's a like, Rome is a, well, the simplest way to explain what it currently is it's a, you know, it's a note-taking app. That is as simple to use as like a bulleted list, or, you know, Dropbox paper or Google Docs. But you don't need to think ahead of time about how, you know, how what file or folder your idea should be in. If an idea relates to the history of Rome and, you know, Justin Kahn and like podcasts, right? And I you know, indent underneath all those tags, like this conversation will come up, and all of the, if I go and look at your page, I'll just see, you know, the bullet points I have, that were, you know, from everywhere I've ever written about you in one place, and I can filter on that, and I can look for these intersections. It's designed to be a way of externalizing your thoughts that more closely mimics the structure of your thinking, right? Of associative links between things, and overlapping hierarchies for one. But the goal is to create a different kind of medium that is different than prose. The goal is to create a different way of creating an external like representation of your mental model around, you know, a problem, a question, like a field of knowledge that you're interested in, so that someone could more quickly like interact with that, and like engage with you in a deeper way than like having to read everything you've ever written. They can like actually, you know, grab chunks of your thought and riff off of them. And we're basically trying right now, your brain is a graph. It is a, you know, there's sort of links between thoughts and ideas, and there's, you know, overlapping clouds of concepts, and for us to transfer that, I have to turn my fuzzy graph into a string of words that I say you one at a time. And I have to hope from like looking at your reaction that like some of those have clicked, and, you know, maybe it, like you'll ask me a question, so I'll like give you a different string based on what question you have, right? But really we want to figure out how to go like graph to graph, right? Instead of going graph to stream to graph. Like we want to just go graph to graph, right? We want to just figure out like who's reading the same papers we're reading, who's watching the same YouTube videos, what's the next best thing, who are the people who are like in the same corner that I'm in, where like, who are the, you know, 6 months from now, has there been anybody who's thought the kinds of things I'm thinking, and like where did they change their mind in 6 months, right? Like those kinds of things, but have it be something where it's you're in, it's not like Google organized all the world's data to serve you the perfect ad. And I think that there's just so much richer potential for like, if you can figure out how to like mesh your thoughts with someone else's. Yeah, it should be more decentralized, right? It should be something where like it's your fucking brain. Like you've got it. You decide what to do with it, who to share it with. So
What does
yeah,
that
that's kind
what
of
does that look like from a product
the
perspective? Like that graph to graph, that's fascinating to me. It's like that's the multiplayer mode of Rome. Like I get access to kind of your notes or something, and I can be in follow the patterns like your thought pattern.
It's one of the things that's challenging, right? Is that you know, most people would assume that Rome is like, oh yeah, like it was a crazy year last year. Like we went from, you know, we've not charged anything. We're not sure if anyone's going to pay the amount that we're like asking for, to we're offering people the ability to pay $500 for a 5-year plan, and which, you know, all the VCs were telling us not to do, right? They were like, this is you know, and yeah, it took us 6 weeks to get to $1 million in like recurring revenue, which was nuts. Like I did not expect that to like, yeah, I did not expect there to be that much early demand in the first year. I was just hoping to get to a place where we would be profitable, because I have no idea how long it's going to take to solve these UI challenges. Like even just like looking at, like block references, right? Like, uh, there's so many places where there isn't precedent for us to look at. Now there's 7 or 8 apps that are doing things exactly like Rome is, right? But it's like the notion of even embedding a block in different places and having a different UID for the wrapping element than having the same block show up in 2 places. Like that was pretty intentional. It took a long while to get there, right? Now there's like 8 apps to do this, right? There's no precedent for a lot of these multiplayer things. I think that there are, and I think that we're going to get them wrong a bunch. We've been getting them wrong quietly, like in how we use Rome as a team. And I think it might take years to figure out how to really do this graph to graph stuff. But I'm like, what would you even use Neuralink for if you were mind melding with somebody? That, like, for me, the only thing I can imagine is a nightmarish confusion, because I can't even like always communicate effectively when we have words to point to, right? I'm just like, I don't want to see a flash of images from your childhood. Like, it's like, if we're trying to think together, it does help to scaffold things. It does help to like, it does help to like find patterns that allow us to like make like pretty good decisions and good models of things, right? So that's the goal, is to like figure out all those UIs. But I think I honestly do think it also kind of ends up looking structurally like right? You have your brain, I have my brain. You can decide to like take some of my beliefs and put them into, or like, things I found interesting or my notes, and pull them into yours. And then they're in yours, right? They're like, you can modify them. You could suggest a change coming back, but like, like gets its own set of, it's a good, architecture, but it's a terrible UI. So you don't want to try and build it off of that. So yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I love that. And one thing you talked about earlier was like that your brain should be this is my information and my thoughts. This should be decentralized. But like, how do you think that actually plays out for you? I mean, you guys are a centralized app, right?
Sure. I mean, from day one, like as soon as we started letting people just sign up, we let people export their data as JSON, and we got all sorts of interesting benefits from that. Like in terms of just people doing weird things we wouldn't have predicted, and therefore we could learn from them. Like, I think that inevitably you want to have like, inevitably the story goes towards decentralization. But for me right now, it's like people talk about like try to only have a one miracle company. Like Rome's already a many miracle company. It's just we're trying to have the miracles one at a time, right? And and at any given point, there's plenty of opportunity where we might not, like, it might even be a not a tractable problem, right? Like there's some world where like actually maybe, there's not a really good way to allow people to set up like a multiplayer Rome that actually can like do large scale sense making, or allocation of attention for like a group of 1,000 people to be able to like make sense of a complex issue together, right? Like, is ivermectin a useful prophylactic against COVID, right? Like that might not even be, like, you just kind of have to believe that there's a good chance you could figure it out, right? And you have to have a hunch on a particular line of attack, but like, you aren't going to know always how long it's going to take to solve some of those questions. So yeah, like decentralization is where we inevitably have to get to. I think the first step is, and what we're working on this year is just like, end-to-end encryption. We have end-to-end encryption at the level of a block, but I think it would be like, there are a lot of ways to make it more ergonomic. We chose to build as like, a centralized service because you've got a complexity budget, and like making things fully decentralized is like, it just means there's more stuff that could go wrong, and it's harder to like rapidly iterate on all sorts of shit. And we're trying to figure out a language for how can a group of people like think together, like what even are the right interaction patterns. And yeah, like there's and how do you communicate even to people that they're joining a company where it's going to be like that, right? People actually do have extremely high, like they expect like Kanban boards and like that they shouldn't have to like write down the decisions that they're making and like actually try and make their thoughts externally explicit so that other people, you know, on the other side of the world could like learn from how they're modeling the problem. Like we're doing things in a way that I do think is harder than one might expect for a company with like around 10 people. But the goal is to try and figure out how, as we add people, we're not overrun by coordination costs, because people take for granted the idea that like you keep adding more people and more time gets spent in meetings, right? Or more time gets spent like playing telephone of like, right? And like the, you know, my thinking is like, if we can figure out how to think really effectively together using the tool, and we figure out new kinds of, a lot of this is inspired by Doug Engelbart's process of like co-evolution of tools and culture. If we can figure out how to think well together, right? How to make Rome a place culturally where like the best ideas win. It doesn't, you know, and people are like transferring subtle tacit knowledge models that aren't fully articulate, right? But are just sort of like, you know, things that you do get from years of practice, right? And we can like have those kinds of like hard to communicate, hard to make legible transfers of knowledge happen too. Yeah, I think then you can do a lot of crazy shit, right? If you can figure out how to like not be overrun by coordination costs as you scale, then you can start to, you know, yeah, like it's almost like runaway. It's not quite. It's more humane. It's not AGI, but it's pretty damn close, right? It's like a group of people that can actually think together instantaneously, and you know everything that the whole group knows, like, or like within an hour. Like that's pretty damn close to AGI. So that's the problem.
And do you think that Rome, so then in that way, your startup is the model for like a new way of organization that like doesn't require the same onboarding cost or coordination cost? Is that right?
Yep. Well, yeah. So the way that we, you know, it's intense dog fooding, right? Like the only precedent for it is, you know, NLS, right? The online system that like was like the second node in the ARPANET and like the mother of all demos, you know, where they like they get the team that invented the mouse is the only precedent I have for this kind of like intense co-evolution of tools and culture that was intentional. And yeah.
Can you tell the story on that? Were they using the mouse to like invent the mouse?
Like, I mean, in 1962, Doug Engelbart put out this paper, Augmenting the Human Intellect. Like prior to this, the notion that you would have computers with screens and like humans would like interact with the data on there and like put new data in, and like that there would be this like feedback loop of like human and computer was just like a ridiculous proposition. And you know, like, but his framework was like, in order to, we are, you know, our problems are getting more and more complex. They're getting overwhelming. Like they're touching these like, you know, more and more complicated fields, and like they're wicked problems that like no one person in the world can have enough information to like know what to do. And even if they did know what to do, they're not going to be able to solve it. They need to marshal like, you know, 1,000 people to like put in a plan for, you know, a vaccine rollout or whatever, right? And yeah, so like the you know, the setup that Engelbart's Augment Research Center had, right? They basically built the first sort of you know, they're most famous for the mouse, and then the team that's most famous for like graphical user interfaces and like, you know, personal computing was like half the team that went to Park afterwards, right? But prior to this, they were thinking about like structured knowledge and figuring out like collaborative problem solving, and you know what a culture looks like where like everyone is sort of reflecting on like the same kinds of lessons and the same kinds of processes. This guy also ended up going and being on the board of Landmark, which is also, you know, like it's like a productivity cult that's pretty popular in San Francisco now.
Yeah.
but like they were trying to figure out flat organizations and like all sorts of like cultural norms in like the 70s that we're just catching up to now, right? So they did kind of race a little too far ahead, where they couldn't actually maintain a connection to like, you know, the mainstream culture in order to like have those ideas transmit. And there's a lot of risk in going this path, but like you can get like there is a curse of knowledge where it's hard to communicate with people if you end up with a mental model that's way out there, right? So the challenge is always like, how do you maintain a connection between like the root of the tree and like the edges of the tree, so that you're always able to like have other people you know, like check your work, like check your sanity, like, and also you're able to bring them along so that they can explore another path and like help answer these questions. Like if you think about the sort of the map of, you know, the knowledge of the human race, right? That's the, you can get lost in conceptual space. And I do feel like that's sometimes happened to these pioneers, right? So yeah, I don't know if, but like, I mean, it's hard to imagine how different the working environment was, you know, when like, imagine taking like imagine taking a startup today and like throwing it into like the 60s, and like, it's, you know, there'd be a big culture clash, right? Especially if you're building tools for like remote work and co-working and like crowdsourcing ideas from your people and like having flat hierarchies and 360 reviews, and there's a whole context that's just like not at all there in like this, like in the culture that existed at the time, right? So they ended up, you know, getting sold to an aircraft carrier company. It all kind of died, right? Ended up in development hell for decades, right? So like there is a tragedy to that story too. So yeah.
Well, how do you make sure that that doesn't happen with what you're doing, right? Like, I feel
charge
like
more.
Do you?
Yeah, I charge money for what I'm doing. Yeah, I charge money, and I try and keep, you know, like, and like that's how, simply, right? I'm like, we are bootstrapping our own thing, but it's like we're not dependent on a government contract, or like we do have a sense of control of our own destiny, and you know, like there's a lot less permission needed in order to do this right now, right? That is the beautiful thing that we're in. And so if we're clear about what we're doing, there's enough people who I think will and we sort of like, we stay grounded with reality, where we're not just doing like, this is sort of like you ship early, ship often, right? Ship things before they're like necessarily super polished, to see if there's even any interest. And like rather than just going completely down some rabbit hole, like we're always using the stuff, and we develop further out the things that we're using, and we like pay attention, you know, you don't I fully expect that like plenty of people will not agree with the things that I prioritize, but you know, I couldn't explain why bidirectional links were important verbally to people for 5 years. So that's why I had to live in a van, right? Like, I don't expect to explain to people like the unsolved questions, especially when the models are hazy. I'm just like, I'm building a tool to be able to more clearly articulate the problem space, even to like to the team that I've hired, and like to be able to learn from them and to be able to do knowledge transfer. It's hard to, you know, it's hard to explain when you're trying to create a new medium for representing thought, and like you're trying to write a new language. That's kind of what it is.
Well, that's actually
we're getting better at it.
Stop. Yeah. I know we only had an hour.
Yeah. We're an hour in.
We're over an hour.
Yeah, I do feel like I ranted a little bit.
No, dude, that was great. That's great.
Any other things
it was. Well, I wanted to talk about climate change, actually, if you have a few more minutes. Like, I know you have an interest in climate change, and I was just curious. I was curious what it, like, how you think about how we might solve the problem or attack the problem in the, you know, in the world. That's one of the interest areas of our fund, is like investing in climate change startups.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so the post that I shared was from Brett Victor, and who I think is like, I tweeted like, if there's still humans like 6,000 years from now, more people will know about Brett Victor than about Donald Trump. Is like I put some credence on that. Like, I do feel like he's one of the like real like active philosophers right now. He was one of the early designers at Apple, but he's been extremely like, he has a talk on how do I what was it called? It was what's the name? Like inventing on principle. He basically talks about how like when choosing how to live your life, you can live your life like an inventor can sort of be like an activist. Like you can have a principle that you're like, like something you passionately believe and your life is trying to like reify that. And yeah, I've always found him super inspiring, and I found his framework for thinking about the problem of representing thought and the problem of yeah, the problem of how to learn and make good decisions and build mental models, like super important. So anyways, the post I shared was from him. And I originally started thinking about localocracy and about Rome and about the broader problem of like collective action and collective intelligence, when I was in college, and I was starting to get concerned about climate change as, a dramatic instance, but like an instance in a more general problem set of something where just incompetency seems to be totally the state of affairs. Like our system is set up where there's like these greater than human incentive structures where it's like, okay, well, if you're not the one who pollutes, someone else who pollutes will take that place, right? Like if you're not going to be the cutthroat CEO, someone else will be a cutthroat CEO for you, right? Like there's some like struck pattern, right? There's and we have names for some of them, right? People talk about like structural oppression, right? But it's like there are these non-human like ways of like they're like game theory shapes that like are running the world, right? Like Twitter likes, right? Like democracy is in many ways one of these, like the fact that senators spend more time dialing for dollars, and there's actually no correlation between popular opinion on a bill and whether people support the bill in Congress. It's like these incentive structures are more powerful than any one person who's participating in them. But like we're already sort of run by non-friendly AGI, right? Like when people talk about artificial general intelligence and how it might take over the world, like AGI already runs the world, and it's totally not human aligned, right? That's why climate change, that's why COVID's an issue. Like all these things are fucked, and it's not one person's fault, and it's not one group of people's fault. It's like there's just a lot of these setups that it is really hard for any individual to fight against. And it's really hard for people to coordinate to change. So climate change seems like it was the first extinction event. Like if we don't figure this out, maybe we're going to get screwed. It's interesting because I thought, it's not the one I point to as much now, because partially I've seen the way in which like it's been co-opted by one of these non-friendly AGIs, right? Which is that, there does seem to be a consensus within our scientific institutions, which are funded by, the government, that like there's a tendency towards things which encourage more power, right? Like anytime 99.9% of scientists tell you something, that's not how science works. Like that's just there's some sort of art that's like someone winning an election with 99.9% of the like climate change is obviously real. Obviously we should do something about it, right? But like that's not like consensus is not science. Science is driven by great, powerful explanations that any individual can check. If you have to shout down people for being skeptics are what science is built on. All progress depends on these like, people who are like seeing things that others aren't and able to find powerful explanations for these things. So I'm currently extremely concerned about our ability to make sense of new information, particularly situations where we need to act quickly and convince and bring a bunch of other people along with us. Like people are more interested in like what does it make me, like, who am I if I believe this thing? Like, is the right team supporting this idea, or is the wrong team supporting this idea? Like, if somebody who I don't like says this is true, it's definitely false, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's, so my
The
insight to
tail's
climate
wagging
change
the
was that
dog
I
on
was
our
like,
thoughts.
one, we need to figure out how to, yeah, right. Like, it's all socially coordinated and it's all socially mediated, and we're not able to, like, because we don't have good ways of actually, like, checking each other's work and having, like, a full, like, being like, okay, like, do we have a way of both, like, yeah, building up from first principles and figuring out non-ideologically, like, statusy, like, what is the full range of good ideas? It's like, why would the even the collections of beliefs between the two parties, right? In Thailand, the people who are anti-abortion are all vegan, right? Like, or the people who are pro-life are all vegan, right? Like our but we somehow sort of think that, like, politics is, like, the natural collection of how these beliefs should be sorted. It's like, it's totally arbitrary. So anyways, so my rant is, like, I'm particularly interested in figuring out how to change our how you could figure out um, uh, yeah, what's true, how to replace the media. That's my I think, and I think that problem is upstream of is probably upstream of climate change, because even if we have really great plans, like, if you look at how successfully we handled COVID, like, and you look at how, like, dramatic the change in our ecosystems are, forget even the temperature, like, just, rivers, like, having no fish anymore, and, like, bees disappearing, like, there's just, like, it's all around us that there's just this gradual slow decline of everything, and we're not able to take any sort of dramatic, like, change of beliefs. It's all updating in, like, either, like, yeah, either too fast or too slow, but it's, like, not uh so it doesn't make any sense. So the challenge is, like, can we figure out a way to make sense of the world together and then be able to act based on that? And, you know yeah, but that's the way I think you work on that, and all these other problems, is, like, figure out, it kind of goes back to the Christianity thing. Like, the thing that I found really inspiring about um well, I'm really glad my first company failed before I had any kind of power, right? Because I had, like,
Yeah.
an idea for how things should be, and thank God I didn't have the political power to force anybody to do anything, because I just had no idea, actually, as a 19-year-old, relative to what I thought I knew. And so I'm glad that, but the thing that I liked about the whole, at least the church planting movement that I saw, is, like, they were like, focus on, like, the people, focus on your relationship to yourself, and then the people immediately around you, and then, like, each concentric circle out, and trying to, like, um trying to sort of, you know if you're going to change things, you start, looking at yourself and seeing, like, how can I make myself better, and how can I improve my relationship with people immediately around me. Um and I feel like that act, like, that doesn't need to be a, like, it's not the same as, like, oh, let me recycle, or, like, do, like, some fucking, you know put all my attention into, like, blaming myself for these larger structural issues. Though, no, the structural issues are still there. Like, the thing, yeah, like, the recycling isn't going to solve climate change when all the jobs are moved over to China and then all the pollution is happening there, right? Like, there's um you know your recycling can be a distraction, but, like, so you do want to figure out how to pay attention to those things, but only if you're, like, focused on, like, getting your mind right, getting your relationships right, getting your trust right, like, being able to change your mind when the facts change, when you see new things, being able to be resilient, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of my, like,
I,
we gotta start somewhere.
I love it. So it's like starting at this is the root cause. And if we can figure out how to communicate with each other and coordinate around collective action around a shared truth, set of truth, and like
Can we learn together?
that's upstream of
Can
all
we
these
change
other
our
problems.
models?
Yeah, beautiful.
I mean, particularly because like particularly because in my model, it's like the people who are already doing this, right? Like it's pretty hard to force people who don't want to like form an accurate model of the world to do so, right? But the people that I've met who are having by far the largest impact on the world are the ones who change their mind the fastest, right?
Yeah.
And so there is a sense in which like, you know, like like yeah, like Patrick Collison's one of our users, right? You know, like that.
Yeah.
And he was one of the few people that I was like really, you know, he was thinking about like problems in the institutions of science and like how to make things, you know, how to build big institutions, that kind of thing. I was like, this is someone who's really interested in the truth, and you know, if I can help them achieve their goals, I actually do think there's a good chance that, you know, that will bring about a more like truth-oriented society. Laura Deming is one of the people who I have extreme conviction, like that she's, you know, if we're going to live healthily for an extra 20 years or 30 years or 100 years, like Laura's going to have a part to play in it. And so when I think about my vector of impact on, you know, human longevity and like, you know, the disease that is aging, my best hope was like, if I can help Laura, you know, be 5% more effective, right? That's my vector for trying to improve those things. And, but then there's also, you know, like, you know, the story of Ramanujan, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, right. Like there's so many brilliant kids in the middle of nowhere, Nigeria or, you know, Somaliland or like, you know, Nepal, right? And giving them leverage to learn faster from other people, to meet other people without having to go to an, you know, a university or you know, or school, but like being able to find other like folks that they can share their map of the territory with and figure out how to make sense of things together. And I think you can like, I do get, you know, accused of elitism, but I'm like, you know, like it is true that some people are going to, the bottleneck is usually not intelligence, it's courage, in my opinion, right? You have to be willing to stick with a problem, just like you know, like I saw someone say, genius is caring about something more than anyone could reasonably expect to care about it, right? Like,
Yeah.
and like that's you know, that's not going to be evenly like like the whole nature of genius is that they're going to be specialized and like probably thrown randomly on the globe. But if you can help them communicate, and if you can help, yeah, like yeah, yeah, then you don't need to change the whole world. Like, you know, you change the people who want to think better, right? Or you help them find each other, you help them like help each other, like, and like hopefully they figure out how to live a life that is itself attractive enough, right? The best way to you know, they would say in Christianity, right? Like the best evangelism is just being a really fucking good person. They wouldn't swear, but like they would say like that's actually how you really convert people, is you're just like you don't go give some like some argument, right? You don't go like, it's actually, if you're just really kind and compassionate and you're there for them and you're on like, and you live like, the theory I have is that or the theory I like is that Jesus is a distributed system after the crucifixion, right? And that basically, you know, there's in the Bible they say like when two or more of you are gathered, I'm there, right? That like the goal is to download the Christ operating system, right? And that like actually you're like, you know, when they like sort of, there's this idea of, you know, energy flows where attention goes, like the neurons that fire together wire together, like my model of agency in the brain. Great essay by Kevin Simler, Neurons Gone Wild. I like the idea that like there's many different agents in the brain. That's what addiction is. It's a demon. It's a pattern that like, you know, gets fed by repetitive sort of like firing patterns of your neurons. Like you can host the spirit of Jesus, just like you can host the spirit of like honest truth seeking I think they're kind of related actually, but like that seems like enough now that I've gone weirdly mystical on it. But like yeah, like that's
like,
how you change things, is if you try and like so you would post it in the the little text of stuff to cover, like what kind of stuff I'm thinking about, and it is this like I was talking about like a particular ADHD struggle on Twitter, around like, because being able to coordinate with people, you want to make commitments and, do things like show up on time, right? Always for my entire life been a major challenge for me, right? I've not had a consistent sleep schedule since high school, right? So, and I heard from this guy in Kuwait, and he was talking about how the biggest change that had helped him with like, building trust in himself as someone with ADHD was like, was looking at self-love and self-hatred and self-judgment, right? And like discovering that he had like major anger issues that actually stemmed from the anger that he had towards himself, because he like couldn't really work with him. Like his, ADHD brains are kind of hard to work with, including for the people who have them. Like it can be really frustrating. The higher a standard you set for yourself when you fail to meet it, it definitely has a negative impact on the people around you. And that can lead to a whole crazy guilt spiral. And we had I was just, I DM'd with him and I was like, hey, can you talk like right now? And turns out he had been a former Muslim extremist and had like, sort of become more moderate when he went back to Kuwait. And we were just talking about this whole idea of judge not that ye be not judged applies to yourself as well, right? And that like Jesus is telling you to like stop fucking hating yourself so much, and that will allow you to love thy neighbor as thyself requires that you love thyself, right? In order to fulfill the commandment, like you actually do need to figure out how to accept, which is especially hard, I think. Well, I think it's always been hard. It's we're it's hard for folks to find self-love, and it's really freaking hard. I mean, I was enjoying I'm sure you've got thoughts on this. We've got 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's been something that's been I mean, that was a huge struggle for me. Like I feel like oftentimes we don't create societal structures to help ourselves realize that or come to self-love. Like a lot of, maybe this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where we've gone away from like institutions like the church, which maybe reinforces some messages like that. Maybe not. It probably depends on like the particular brand and
I mean,
breed,
the boogeyman story of church we hear now is that it only did, I don't think anyone can imagine a positive church, despite the fact that right. Everyone imagines now in the church like only was there to install like self-hatred and self-loathing, without recognizing that like it was around for thousands of years in a very diverse world. Like it probably was not the boogeyman that you heard from like
exactly everything. Is there's black and white, there's shades of gray to everything, right? It's not just a black and white story. But like for myself, like there was no institution of like that really helped me have self-love and self-acceptance. And so the replacement for that for me was like, oh, if I it's the same thing you were talking about earlier. It was like the capitalist attention
hustle cults
grabbing. Yeah, hustle cult was the thing that was like, oh, if I just like fulfill these things,
yeah,
like
dude, you had a camera on your head.
Yeah, exactly. If I become successful by getting attention, then I will have like self peace, right? Like I'll find I'll be okay with myself. And obviously that didn't work out. Like I became successful by the external metrics, but then it didn't really change anything for me, right? Like internally, like nothing on the outside ever changed anything for me internally. So finding that to be wanting, and then what kind of researching and trying to understand what could come next for me, and finding a lot more in what's effectively meditation and gratitude, just practices and daily practices that really helped me, was something that was really life-changing. And I I'm very interested in finding ways to institutionalize that for other people.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like, I guess the first thought was something like, physician, heal thyself, and like, take the log out of your own eye, before fixing it for your brother's eye. Like, I mean, here's something you can cut from the podcast, which I was thinking about. It's like, who the fuck's gonna sympathize with you, Justin Kahn? Like, you're a kabillionaire, like you've got like there is this thing that I've been worried about as you start to look more successful to other people, of like, holy shit, like actually there is something where there's like some people get like they're detached in, like they I don't know, the idea that you could be worthy of sympathy for anything, right?
Yes.
Oh, you must have it so much easier than like, right? Like they like who the fuck is going to empathize with you? Like, you can't. It would be completely socially untenable for you to like really, like actually want acceptance from other people or something like that, right? You're supposed to be, you're famous and you're successful, right? Like what kind of fucking loser are you to actually want anything from anybody else now? Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing about that is that I do get that. I get that on YouTube or whatever. People are like, I'd rather be crying in a Ferrari than like poor, and there's some of that, but then there actually is, I was surprised and heartened by the fact that there are quite a few people out there who are like, wow, you're, like, it's true that like rich people, successful people are just human beings too, who have their own ups and downs. And like, I believe you because I think, they see like I'm saying it in a somewhat authentic way, and they like see that and they're like, oh, I believe this guy. And so it's like, it is reassuring to me in some way, because I know that like, no matter where I'm at, what I achieve, I'll still be a human being at the other end of it. And I'll still have like ups, I'll still have downs, I'll still have like needs for acceptance for myself and others. And I think that is a powerful message to people, which is, which reaches some set of the audience,
Yeah, no, it's definitely nice. It's definitely nicer to have money than to not have money, having not had money, like, it's like I would, but like, it really also does cause a lot of other problems. Right. And it's like, it's a like, and there is an interesting thing of, startups are a beautiful place where like, I've been thinking about the sort of pointy edges that I've refined over the years in order to like, keep living my life against the better advice of everyone who I knew. And like just how to like update as, as things have changed or something like that. Right. It's like, you develop some sharp edges and you're like, I don't know if that actually makes as much sense anymore. How do I like shift that now? Is that survival strategy like still appropriate in this new environment? It's hard to tell, and it's definitely hard for your subconscious to tell and like actually update and have that like propagate through into your like felt sense of like just how you are in the world. But I don't know, my like I one thing I will just say on that is like meditation is definitely awesome. I would say like, but I guess I want to figure out how to build community that like actually is like accountable, right? And like actually does say like, hey, like this isn't going to be for everyone, like, but like this is like, we believe some things together and this is what we believe, and like we want to live well, like we want to like try and like there's a good life. There's such a thing as a good life, and it might not be playing slot machines for the rest of your life. You know what I'm saying? Like there is such a thing as an objective standard for like how we want to be to one another, and you can fall short of that, right? Like it is not all just like subjective. Like there's values and virtues, and there is like their code of ethics and their ways, and also we fucking love you where you're at, and if you're actually trying, we're gonna try and like figure out how to have you work within the system, right? Like that's That's
yeah,
the, um,
I,
I don't
I
know.
love
That's
that.
the thing that I
Yeah,
want. And
yeah.
I'm like,
Well, I've been thinking about that a lot, and for the past couple of years. And I think that like part of all of the things I'm doing are kind of like fit into a master plan around that, in a way. And I always conceive of it as, what helped me through my, this process is like coming up with a set of practices and that helped me live a better life, right? Like those things, meditation, gratitude,
yep,
fitness, like I've talked about them a lot. And then it was creating support structures around me or community around me that helped me maintain those things, right? Like, so I stopped drinking alcohol, and one of the
yep,
support structures was like, I had some other friends who
yep.
quit drinking alcohol too. And I had said, it's part of my identity. And I'm like, not going to drink again. I put it on Twitter. And then there was a whole momentum around
Yep.
not drinking for me. Right. And then same was true of
Yep.
meditation. I had like
Yep.
meditation group and
I had a
exercise group,
similar
stuff like
thing.
that.
I had a similar thing.
Yeah. And so what I was
Yeah.
thinking, then I
And part
started,
of it is reducing choice, right?
yeah.
Pre-commitments. Yeah. Go on.
So I was thinking like, how do you create, like, how do I apply like what I've learned about the consumer internet to create infrastructure around that? And I conceived of it as like three parts. Like one was like the marketing part, or like lead generation, or like getting information out there. And so that's actually why I started the podcast. Is like, can I create this like
Yep.
information about this and these ideas out there that anyone can access, and then that might get
Fame
them
is
just
leverage, right?
interested.
If people are paying attention to you.
Exactly.
Yep.
Then the second part, the second phase was like,
leverage. Yep. Go on.
the second phase is the like this idea of like an app basically, or some way to get people started on working on like their healthy habits. And so I actually created the app. It's called Kin Habit Tracker, and it's like a way to build
I
like
downloaded
positive
it.
habits
I paid
in your
for the
life.
subscription.
Thank you, appreciate that. And
Yep.
and then
You're
like the
welcome.
idea was like, can you create social accountability around adopting some of these habits? And I think that's in a very rudimentary form for what it could be. But and then the last thing I was thinking about is like, what's the physical version? So like once you're all the way down the funnel, you're like, okay, I'm really interested in like creating these structures for myself or being part of a structure. Can you create like, there's a reason why in every religion there's church or sangha or like, community, right? Like physical community where people like gather around specific principles. And that's my last idea is like, how do you implement like the physical community?
All right. Here's to what end though? Right?
Help people live
like why?
Yeah, that's a good question. And for me, it's like,
yeah, but like, aren't
it's
and how much simpler what would change if you expected to lose all of your money doing this? And you expect, like, that was the plan, was that you would not make an IPO out of Kin, but like you would lose everything in doing it. How would your plan change?
That's a good question. I like that. I'll answer the first part first, which is like, to what end? It's like, I think it's the same thing that causes anybody to create any sort of organizational structure that they think is better for people. It's like you see it as good for yourself, and then you've like other people, you think that it's evangelical.
Enlightened
right?
self-interest.
It's like,
yeah.
Exactly. It's like I can help other people through the methodologies that help me. And so I want to create the structure that like, propagates itself, it's like a meme, right? And then,
Totally. I mean, like the thing that
and then the last, to what would change if I spent all my money, or intended to lose all my money doing it? It's maybe the amount I was investing in it. I feel like I invest a lot of time, but not that much money. Maybe I would just invest more money and like try to do more.
Yeah, but I feel like quickly. I mean, if the goal was to, like, if you actually expected that it would still be a good life decision if you lost everything, right? This is sort of, I got Brent's on the call, right? And I had an off the record, phone call with some young entrepreneurs once, and like someone asked me like how to build like an enterprise sales cult, and I like lost it on him, because I'm like, what are you talking about? Like why the hell would you want to do that? Like, what would why are you, like, you have one fucking life to live?
It's because his religion is money, right? Like, that's the reason you would do it.
Yeah, I mean, and like there's, every idol, like that's the thing that's cool about, like, you know, every idol falls short, right? Right now, like
Yeah.
there's a lot of gods. People have, they make a god out of their romantic partner. They worship their partner, or they worship the idea of true love and finding the right person. And like for them, like, finding your soulmate is like, it's the same story. You're trying to construct a narrative that's just as intense as people finding Jesus, right? When they have conversion stories, right? And you're let down because this person is not a god, right? There's no
Yeah.
person who's not going to let you down. There's no thing that's not going to like let you down. There's no idea that's not going to let you down, right? Like everything in life will fucking let you down, and still life's worth living. Like still life,
Yeah.
like you will suffer no matter what the situation, and still it's like actually things like there is good out here, right? And like there is beauty out there, and it's like still there, even when, like, no matter how bad the situation you're in, you can always make it worse. No matter how good the situation you're in, you can always make it better. Like that to me is heaven and hell, right? Like they're just recursive feedback loops. There is a cool thing about, capital, which is like if you find a thing that's just really good and you capture some of the value you create, you can invest it to potentially find more better things, right? Similarly, if you're fucking obsessed with hoarding it and that is the ends, right? Then like you're going to end up gradually making your product shittier and shittier and finding all sorts of ways to good heart, or like to make the, what they say a metric which becomes a measure, or like a metric which becomes a target fails to be like a good metric, right? As soon as you're like teaching to the test, you stop teaching the fucking kids how to think. So,
Yeah.
if you're just trying to figure out only how to make money, then you're screwed. Anyways, it's just, I'm like, I agree with you to some extent of like, but like, I'm also like, why, like, what, why do you actually want, or why are the people who are using your apps like actually wanting good habits? Is it just so they can like be more fucking elite? Like can they, so they're like the more fucking like slim, so their Instagram
Yeah.
profile's better, so they get more likes, so they can feel that gnawing self-loathing inside them because they weren't pretty in middle school? Like, I'm like, what's the point of all these healthy habits if you like don't have like
Like a
any sort of way
true
of
purpose,
like
like
stitching
informed
meaning together, or
purpose.
anything bigger than yourself? Anything bigger, yeah,
Yeah.
like what's the purpose, right? It's like if it's just and so anyways, that's my, I'm like, now like dude, like fucking religion that makes demands on you is going to make it come back, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not any of this like prosperity gospel shit, right? Like the religion that's going to fucking, that we all want is to be asked to do something. Like for fuck's sake, like the main thing we were asked for with this pandemic was to play video games and order more takeout, right? It's like most people, at least most elites, weren't asked to make any sacrifices. The only people making any sacrifices are the, the essential workers, which really means the fucking dispensable people that we don't mind sending out into the pandemic because they're fucking low wage, right? It's like, um, you know,
No.
uh, yeah, but like there's been no sacrifices. People, I think, are like want to make sacrifices. Some people, right? And it's meaningful to make it feels fucking good to like work your ass off and not be like just to be recognized for contributing something, to be recognized for like for growing, for actually being able to like be more tomorrow than you were today because you were pouring yourself into a problem that was real and getting better at it. Like, I don't know. That's the thing that I think there's a fucking, I feel like there's a real yearning for, and yeah, I don't know, but like that's, yeah, I don't know. Like,
I love
so that's
that.
my
That's
like,
super
I think
inspiring.
you're onto something. I think you're onto something, but I'm like, I don't think it's a fucking app to start. Or something. Like maybe it is an app. I mean, obviously I'm building it. I'm trying, Rome is trying to figure out like what would the Bible look like if we were all writing it together, but actually we were trying to do truth seeking, and it wasn't all just like everyone make up their own thing. It's like, no, we're trying to like make sense of complex problems, and like some things are, it depends on the context, right? It's like actually it's not a single textual object of like, this is always true in all situations. It's like a high dimensional map of like useful things that will help you navigate the world and like acquire knowledge and skill to like try and solve real problems. But like there is a so anyways, obviously I have my own like but I'm like, I feel like who yeah, I feel like there's something besides just like trying to make a fucking app for this stuff. There's something else too, right? There's like who's actually going to tell you that you're like being fake, you know? Like, do
Yeah.
you have people that are like going to tell you if like you're actually just like, nah, dude, you're doing the thing that's going to make you popular. Like, you're not doing the thing that is like hard and true or whatever, right? Maybe I'm doing it. I'm like, blah.
Yeah, I think
I don't know.
you're right.
That's
I think
my
you're right.
like. There
There's
needs to be
something
real
deeper.
community.
Right. Exactly. There needs to be real community organized around principles that people are willing to sacrifice for and make that trade-off for, right? And so, you know,
Yeah.
I think that's something that's you can mean a lot to think about. It's like, how do you create that? And like, how do you how do you even
And you
find
need
that?
trust. You need the trust to say you're not perfect, right?
You
Like,
know,
how can you tell like, how can you have enough trust to say something like, hey, this thing you're doing is like not having the outcome that you were hoping for, or like this thing that you're doing is hurting people, right? Maybe it's hurting yourself, maybe it's hurting others. And also, I'm not going to abandon you. Like, I still love you. Like, you're fucking up. Like, you're a mess, dude. You're a drunk. Like, but I love you. And like, you're not gonna like, I'm gonna beat your fucking ass if I see you drinking it, like, or something, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it takes a lot of trust to tell somebody honestly that you don't think they're doing the right thing, or that their like work is not up to standard. Like, to even claim that there's such a thing as a standard is like
no,
so not cool, right? So that's kind of my I don't know. And yeah, and to be able to hold that in the same time as like, and that's the thing that I thought, like, that's one of the reasons I love Christianity so much, right? Is that it is both like, it doesn't like, I don't know, in a particular form of it, it's like, hey, like, you're probably actually a terrible person. Like, let's be real. Like, you probably lie to your friends all the time. You probably are super selfish and you get angry at everyone and you like pin things on other people and like you cheat and steal, and like in subtle ways all the time, right? You're probably just like, sin is missing the mark. It doesn't actually even connotate evil. It's just like missing the mark of what it is. You know, in Islam, he talks about like the fucking straight path, right? Like, it's a razor's edge. I think that might even be the razor's edge, might be a Buddhist idea, right? But like, it's hard to like, there is, it's hard to like live really well, like in a way that actually like can make you not a drain on everyone around you or something, right? Like, it's hard, like, it's life's fucking hard. Like, I don't even know how to, like, I don't even know what the razor's edge is. It's hard to seek God and seek goodness, but like, but also it's okay. Like, you're gonna fuck up and you're like gonna be like, and then you just like get right back on it. It's like, you don't tell a story about being bad. You don't tell a story about being a terrible person. You just get right back up and do it. And like, anyways, that's my, like, we don't have that in our society anymore. Like, especially in cancel culture, for Christ's sake. Like, you did something bad 10 years ago and like now, like, no one should ever associate with you anymore, right? Like,
no,
like, if you hypocrite, like, you're proclaiming a standard and you don't live up to it all the time. Oh my God. Like, you like, actually the only thing that's safe to do is to like not have any fucking standards. So I don't know, that's my, like, I think to have trust that we can both hold each other accountable and like be honest, and also be like I don't know how to, that's, I think, the thing that I'm hoping for is, I'm like, I want to figure out like, how do I actually do the thing that Jesus is saying, which is like to not judge myself? How do I do the
yeah,
thing that Jesus is saying is like to like love myself and then others like that, right? Like, and still not like just fucking be making excuses to go do what is easy and like, like serves me in the short term and hurts everybody else around, you know, like go fucking like avoid the like, you know, the hard emotional conversations that require you to be vulnerable with somebody, like, and work through some shit, right? Like just like, oh, just like skip it, go watch some fucking Netflix, go jerk off instead, right? Like it's like, you know, I don't know.
I get
That's
it.
my but I'm like, that's yeah. Like I feel like that's, if we figured out how to do that, that's better than an app. So I don't know.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, Connor, I think this has been an amazing conversation. I loved having
That's a
it.
wrap. Now it's been an
That's a
hour,
wrap.
40 minutes. Yeah. Yeah, man. Thanks. Yeah, that was fun. That was super fun.
Thanks for coming on.